Donald Cozzens is a pastor, professor, author, and noted national and international commentator on religious and cultural issues. His other titles, the book he has with him today is called Under Pain of Mortal Sin. But his other titles include his first novel, the award-winning Master of Ceremonies, Sacred Silence, Denial and the Crisis in the Church, Faith That Dares to Speak, Freeing Celibacy, Notes from the Underground, The Spiritual Journal of a Secular Priest, and The Changing Face of the Priesthood. And I must tell you, Father, that I did read that first one, and I still have the book. I gave it to a lot of people, and I got it back. Because I hunted them down to the, you loan books to people, and unless you are really, really insistent about getting your book back, and I plaster my name all over it, and I get that book back, whoever I loan it to. I've loaned it to a lot of literary people. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jerry. It's good to be here, and I think we've all lost a lot of books loaning them to people who promised to get them back to us, and they didn't.
And even if you put your name on them, a lot of the time they still don't care. They just stick it right in their shelf, and there it stays. Let's talk about the new book first, and then we can talk about a lot of the things you're involved in. Tell me about the book, the subject matter of the book. It's a novel, right?
It is a novel, and the title is descriptive of the story. The title is Under Pain of Mortal Sin. Now that's really referring to the subplot of the novel. But I've discovered that people love stories, and I'm hoping to tell a good story, and yet have a message, a religious message, a spiritual message, a theological message. The story, though, is about a very interesting retired Cleveland policeman. His name is Fergus Mann. He's a widower. Fought in Vietnam, killed a number of people in Vietnam as a soldier, retires early from the police force and finds that he made a big mistake. He's really bored and his life is kind of empty. And then he is, I can say, seduced by a professor at John Carroll University. So the novel, I should mention, is set in Cleveland. And John Carroll's a part of it, and Ursuline College, Case Western Reserve University, and the like. But Fergus Mann, this old school Catholic, his life is kind of lost, and all of a sudden he has a mission when this professor from John Carroll enlists him in keeping the Holy Roman Catholic Church holy and orthodox. Of course, their methodology is what makes the novel move along, because it turns out that Fergus Mann, in the name of God, kills 2 women and attempts to murder a third. These women that are murdered have been ordained Catholic priests by a bishop who is claiming to have apostolic succession. So these women think they are validly ordained priests, but they'll concede that their ordination is illicit. Well, the Catholic Church would say that their ordination is both illicit and invalid. But anyway, Fergus Mann buys into the story that the ordination of women is going to really destroy the church. I quote Blaise Pascal early on in the story. Blaise Pascal said, "Men never do evil more completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction." So the novel is the story of Fergus Mann's, you could say, conversion through the chief character in the novel, the 12th Bishop of Cleveland. His name is Bryn Martin. And so Bryn Martin is the new bishop in Cleveland, and one of the first things that occur would be the murder of Catholic women. So that's kind of the heart of the story.
Sounds like a book that I have to get at right away. JC, you too, huh?
Absolutely. Sounds very interesting.
Yes. Now, the inspiration for this, do you just sit at your desk and kind of in your thoughts go over this would be a nice subject matter? How did you come up with that?
That's a great question, because I've had other people say, where did this story come from? I'd like to think it comes from both my sitting at my desk thinking about it, but also, and perhaps even more so, from my unconscious. I have to wait until the plot comes to me. And very often it'll come to me early in the morning when I'm sipping coffee and praying the breviary. The plot will come to me.
Now, when those thoughts come to your mind, do you have a pencil right close by and a notebook and just jot it down right away?
I have a pencil, no pen. I have a number 2 pencil.
Lead pencil.
A lead pencil. I have pencil sharpeners all through my apartment. But yeah, I have a pencil and I jot these thoughts down. I let them percolate, so to speak. The theological message of this book is that the Catholic Church, with good motivation, has tried to encourage people to do what was right by telling them if they don't do what is right, the penalty is mortal sin. So the title of the book is Under Pain of Mortal Sin. For example, eating meat on Friday, when we Catholics did not do that, it was under pain of mortal sin. When I was ordained, you pray the breviary. Priests need to be men of prayer, otherwise their lives are shallow. If you didn't pray your breviary, mortal sin.
I think we used to call that the priest is reading his office.
Yes.
Is that right?
Praying his office, and we have stories of priests at 10 to midnight have parked their car at the side of the road and are reading their office or their breviary by the light of their headlight on the car, trying to get it in before midnight.
It'd be like the Bible, reading the Bible, would it?
Well, the breviary is made up of primarily Psalms and also readings from the Bible and readings from the fathers of the church. And then, of course, missing Mass on Sunday. If you miss Mass on Sunday freely and deliberately, the church says that's a
mortal sin.
That's a mortal sin, a grave sin. Now, the church's intention was to motivate people to do what they should be doing. We need to be people of discipline. We need to say our prayers. We need to go to church. But a lot of Catholics our age, Gerry, just a few weeks away from turning 80, a lot of Catholics our age have a great deal of what I'll call spiritual fear in their lives. Fear.
You can say that again. The older I get.
Fear of, like, gee, I'm a human being. I don't want to go to hell. I want to go to heaven. And we Catholic priests, we're kind of the spiritual brokers. We're going to get you to heaven if you celebrate the sacraments and lead a good life. So the theological sub-theme is the use of church power in ways that I don't think have always been prudent.
Funny thing you mentioned that. Nellie and I were coming home from church yesterday, and she said to me, she says, there's a small crowd in the church this evening. And I said, yeah. I said, there are a lot of people who go to Mass twice a year, Christmas and Easter. Sunday before it was packed. Yesterday, not so much. What about those people that go? Are they condemned to hell, you think?
Well, you're making me smile because I have a friend who went to daily Mass, weekday Mass, Monday through Friday. But he didn't go to Mass on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you scratch your head.
That's a mortal sin.
Well, is it a mortal sin? See, I think the church is right to say if you want to be a Catholic, you need to make the Eucharist the center of your life, this great act of thanksgiving in which we are in communion with each other, with God, with all of creation. So liturgy and worship is essential to being a Christian, a follower of Christ. If a person goes to Mass 3 Sundays out of a month and then misses the 4th, I'm not sure that's a mortal sin. And we priests can tell you...
Isn't that almost, though, like what, I don't know, who was the, not Luther, but maybe Calvin, self-interpretation of the Bible?
Well, I'm not talking about the Bible here. The Bible does say honor the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Keep holy the Lord's Day. But Jesus never explicitly said you need to go to Mass every Sunday. So I don't think it is the same as, well, the Bible means to me simply what it means to me, and I don't care what it means to you or what it means to the bishops of our church. I think it's different here. I think that it's an adult use of your conscience. If you're a person of prayer, that's important. I think I know people who never miss Mass on Sunday, but they might be the biggest bigots in the neighborhood.
And there might be a bank robber on Monday.
Or a racist, or
Yeah, right.
a person who feels that if you don't think and believe the way I do, then you're wrong, and if you're wrong, then you're evil, and therefore it destroys communion.
Yeah. And how about your character of Fergus Man that killed women? What about him? He a religious man, obviously.
Well, I'm going to ask you to read the novel, Gerry, and you'll
Okay.
find out what
Okay,
happened.
I will.
Here's what happens. Here's the key to Fergus Man. We have this new bishop in Cleveland, Bishop Bryn Martin, who came to us from Baltimore, where he was an auxiliary bishop. He's new to the city, and he said, I'd like to get to know Cleveland as soon as I can. And so one of his priest's assistants says, well, listen, I know somebody who can show you around the city. He's a retired policeman, time on his hands. And so Bishop Martin and Fergus Mann go out about once a week in his little black Ford Focus and drive around the city. And as they drive around the city, and Fergus Mann points out St. Ignatius High School, St. Coleman's Parish, the East Side Catholic centers, they have a conversation. And Fergus Mann is saying, I'm an old school Catholic, go to Mass every Sunday. Hey, and since my wife died, we have no children, and my relatives, they're all liberal. I mean, they're soft on abortion, they don't go to Mass every Sunday, and some of my nieces and nephews are shacking up before they get married. They're all lost, but I'm an old school Catholic.
Okay.
Well, the conversations then work on Fergus Mann's soul. And something happens to Fergus Mann. And I don't want to spoil the story.
Oh yeah, don't do that. We want people to buy this book. I'm hooked already myself. JC is too.
Absolutely.
Yes, we're going to get it. We're going to come back and talk some more. Stand by. Right now in its second printing, you just told me, under pain of mortal sin. Let's see, we get back here to Father Don for a minute, and then we're going to go and play a song or two, and we're going to intersperse it with some music also. You know what I notice these days? And I don't know if all this is relative to the book, but when I talk to you, you cover so many subjects in these, 8 books that you've authored? You covered a lot of subjects. Why is it that it seems to me that the Sixth Commandment seems to be the most popular commandment that people seem to break these days? Or is that true, or is that just, it seems that way?
Oh, you've pushed the right button here. It seems that the Catholic Church is pretty preoccupied with human sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, the Church has a beautiful theology of human sexuality. The Church teaches that in the sacrament of marriage, the sexual communion of husband and wife is a sacrament. It's an occasion of grace and holiness. And there are some theologians who feel that the love of husband and wife in full expression might be as close as you can get to the divine here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the Church would say, there's no venial sin when it comes to sins against the Sixth Commandment. They're all mortal sins. And I think the Catholic laity today are coming to the consensus that that's not simply the case. When I was a boy growing up, if you stole a candy bar from the neighborhood drugstore, that was a venial sin. If you stole $1,000 from your employer, that was a mortal sin. But when it comes to sex, from the perspective of the Catholic Church, if it's not human sexuality expressed in committed relationship, that is marriage, it's sinful, and seriously sinful. And so I think there's a certain schizophrenia here. On the one hand, the Church says human sexuality created by God is beautiful and holy. But if you're not married, and probably half of the world's population is not married, then it becomes quite a challenge. When you consider children, teenagers, widows, widowers, divorced, separated people, the Church feels if you're not married, you should be leading, in effect, a celibate life, like nuns and monks and priests.
What about the husband and wife that divorces? And they're Catholic, married in the church, and then they go off and marry somebody else out of the church. Are they living in sin, or does it depend on their own point of view?
If they have remarried without a declaration of nullity
Yes,
from,
that's what I mean.
from the Church, then the Church considers that marriage irregular, to be kind, and it's very possible that the people living in a second marriage, according to canon law and our theology, would be living in sin. But I'd like to remind myself and your listeners, Gerry, that Pope Francis encourages us not to judge another person's heart. Okay, so I can imagine a Catholic man or woman whose marriage tragically doesn't work, who divorce and then marry again, but they're very loving people. They have an active prayer life. They're not self-centered. They're not consumerist. They're concerned about the poor. They take a service trip to a Central American country. They're not prejudiced.
And they don't believe that they're doing wrong.
I think they might believe that they're doing the best they can. Sometimes an annulment simply doesn't.
For a mortal sin to be committed, I don't know if I'm going back now a good many years to my days in grade school catechism, and there was three things that was required. There was clear knowledge, full consent. There was one more.
Well, it had to be a grave issue, a grave matter.
Grave matter,
Full knowledge and full consent
well,
of the
the
will.
three things that were required in order for something to be a mortal sin. So if this couple that divorced and remarry, if they believe that they're not doing wrong, then how could it be a mortal sin?
Fair question. Subjectively, the Church never says anyone has committed a mortal sin.
No.
We can't know someone's heart. We can speak objectively and say, if you harm children, for example, physically harm them or sexually harm, that's a serious matter. Objectively, that's a serious sin. And I think, it's obvious that there are certain behaviors that harm the human person and society. But when Pope Francis, and more importantly, when Jesus says don't judge, he's talking about judging a person's heart. He's not saying don't judge behavior. That's immoral. Murder is wrong and immoral. But how do we know another person's heart? I think that's where I find the gospel so liberating and invoking of joy in a person's life. When you find joyless Catholics, they're probably legalistic in their approach to faith and probably dogmatic in the sense of thinking that church doctrines are carved in stone. Our core beliefs are everlasting.
Now this new pope we got, he's considered pretty liberal compared to, say, going back to Pius XII or even Pope John. What's your thoughts on him?
I can't tell you how grateful I am for Pope Francis. I don't think he's liberal at all. I don't think he's conservative.
A lot of Catholics
at
do,
all.
though.
Yes. I think that, like Jesus, Pope Francis doesn't fit into the category of liberal or conservative. And you've just touched upon a real issue in the Catholic Church today, an issue also in American society, and that's polarization. The fact that we have some Catholics who don't feel other Catholics are really Catholic because they're not Catholic the way they are Catholic.
Yeah.
And I think Pope Francis, in trying to really build his ministry and mission from the gospel, has earned undeservedly the condemnation of arch-conservative Catholics, ultra-traditional Catholics, who feel that because Pope Francis, I think, who is speaking like Jesus, is actually hurting the church, where in my judgment he is doing just the opposite. He gives me great, great hope.
I'm going to come back and talk some more. It is 11:30 here on the Irish Show on
I
WNBK.
really do miss him. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and my 2 younger brothers, my brother Tom and my
Don't know
brother
him.
Jim, have both died. My sister Mary Ellen is the queen of the land, as far as I'm
Oh, I'd
concerned.
say so.
I would like to tell you I dedicated Under Pain of Mortal Sin to my sister, and this is the dedication. For my sister Mary Ellen, whose goodness, warmth, and joy bless everyone she meets.
Oh, that's so
So,
nice.
anyway, thanks for mentioning Jimmy. He certainly
Oh.
was committed to his heritage. And
Sure was.
Lovely man.
Wonderful person. Now, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the reason for the deterioration? I don't know if I'm using the right word or not of Catholicism in America, but it's really, the deterioration is terrible in Ireland. There's only about 40% of the people of Ireland go to church regularly, and the young people, it's 70% don't even go. But here in this country, when you look around, most churches, there's a few exceptions now, but you look around and they're all older people like myself. Nellie and I notice it all the time. And we do get the younger people on Christmas and Easter, but the rest of the time, no. What do you think is the reason for it? Or has the church gone through this, through its history?
Well, I've given a number of retreats to Irish priests, and I've taught in Ireland, so I've been there regularly over the last 20 years or so, and you're right about a dramatic decrease in Catholic practice in Ireland. I would say it's lower than 40%. As you said, with younger people, it can be even into the teens, the percentage of teens, Irish young people going to Mass. It's pretty similar here in North America. Studies seem to indicate that about 70% of Catholics don't go to Mass on Sunday. There is a drop-off in the number of people celebrating reconciliation, although this past Lent has been a real surprise to a number of priests who have heard many, many confessions during the designated periods that have been encouraged by our bishop. That's a good question. What is going on? Is this a loss of faith? It could well be. Are we becoming so secular, so materialistic, so consumerist that what really matters, faith and hope and love, parish, community, are kind of going down the drain? I think certainly our negative secular culture is a factor there. On the other hand, I feel that the church, in a sense, reached a growth spurt after World War II. 2 things happened that I think get to the heart of your question, Gerry. One is World War II ended, and the GI Bill allowed many working class Catholics an opportunity to go to college. Once the working class Catholics of America had an opportunity to go to college, not all of them did, but a large percentage, they learned how to think, and to think on their own, and to think critically. That doesn't mean you don't think in harmony with the church, but you're thinking. And then the Second Vatican Council happened. So you had World War II and the GI Bill, and then the Second Vatican Council, which reminded Christians and Catholics that if you're baptized, you're an equal member in the church. Obviously, for most people, their function is very different from the function of their bishop. That allowed Catholics to start thinking. And I think they remained faithful for the most part, but they're thinking now as adults. When I was ordained 54 years ago, next month, the Catholics that I was ministering to, many of them felt their role was to believe and to behave, and if they believed and behaved, then they were saved. Or the other way of looking at it is pray, pay, and obey. So you have a different mindset in Catholic laity today. Now, I regret the fact that they're not celebrating Eucharist regularly. I think we clergy need to ask ourselves, to what extent are we responsible for that? What's our preaching like today? What do we really say to people to let them know that we understand the challenges of their daily lives? So your question is above my pay grade, Gerry, but it's a fair question, and I speak to it even though often I don't know what I'm talking about.
What's your thoughts on priests getting married?
What are my thoughts on priests getting married?
Because obviously there's a shortage of priests.
Right. I tried to pay attention to that question in my book, Freeing Celibacy. I would like to say that celibacy is a great gift for any man or woman who really has the gift from God. My concern is that the church is legislating a gift. You can't legislate a gift, according to my theology. I would like to see optional celibacy expanded. Eastern Rite Catholic clergy have a right to marry, and I think that the time has come for the church to expand optional celibacy for priests.
That we call liberalism.
Some people would see it as liberalism, but I think we need to remember that the apostles were married, okay, and that we've had a married clergy for more than half of the church's history. We've had 39 popes who were married. I mean, I don't think they were liberal. I think we need to honor celibacy, but also acknowledge that we can't legislate it. If it truly is a gift of the Holy Spirit, which the church says it is.
It is. On Catholic doctrine?
Gerry, thanks for the invitation. It's always fun to be with you.
But the main thing is we want people to get this book. You can go to Amazon if you want. You can go to a bookstore, right?
Neighborhood bookstore, John Carroll's bookstore has it in stock. Or they can order it from the publisher, ACTA, A-C-T-A. Again, thanks for...
So, but you're retired now, but you're kind of semi-working with John
I'm
Carroll.
discovering that clergy seldom really retire. I'm retired from John Carroll, but I'm on campus every day and volunteer with campus ministry, and I just have found John Carroll a truly special place.
Do you know we're having the Mayo Society tea there on the 9th of June in the Dolan Center, and I'm inviting you now to stop in and have some tea and cookies.
I would love to come and have some tea on the 9th of June.
9th of June, 2 o'clock to 5 in the Dolan Center. We do it every year there, and John Carroll is a partner with us in the Mayo Society. We send students over to Ireland from John Carroll, and we bring students back from Galway University, actually, in Ireland. We have a great partnership with them, and we're happy to do that. But you listen, you've got to come back again and talk more about this book. You say it's in the second printing, right?
Well, I'd be happy to come back and talk more about it. I think that much of what we discussed this morning you'll find in the pages of this novel.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to read it now.
Well,
I'm going to get it on Amazon, I will. And I'll have Nellie read it too, because she loves to read the new books that come out.
well,
Yeah.
hope you do. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, Father Don. It's great having you. Father Don Cozzens, ladies and gentlemen. Great having him with us this morning on WHK Radio and on the internet at whkradio.com.